Right, so I moved down to Mornington from Queensland, and then I came into the framing next door and walked through, found that they had a space available, and got the space. Saw a young fella's studio space down there with some good paintings and a couple of surfboards. Yeah, we hit it off, Baden, and I started to, basically talk painting. That led to an idea about going to Tassie.
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff that I started to paint landscape-wise were directly taken from the places I was visiting when I was going on surf trips. And then when Liam moved in and I realised that he was a surfer, we kind of immediately realised that we had very similar interests. He was painting landscapes as well. And I guess the longer he's been here, the more we've started to influence each other's work. Liam paints faster now and I bloody well paint slower, which I'm not happy about. Liam came up with the idea to go to Tasmania. I don't think he ever thought it would actually happen, but we pulled the three of our heads together and ended up down there in early Jan this year.
So the intention of going was to create a body of work about the experiences we shared individually and collectively, while we were within the wilderness. The idea was to go wild as we could. This body of work was intended to just capture what happened there and what was learned whilst we were there.
We wanted to go there for the same reason everyone else does. It's got largely untouched wilderness areas. It's got the cleanest air in the world, massive trees, really good surf. That's the first kind of reason we thought, we could go on a painting trip and go surfing at the same time. We'd be stupid if we didn't. So that was kind of one of the first draw cards, and then we started doing research into the place. I discovered there was a giant kelp forest down there, which I was really interested in moving my work from painting landscape to underwater.
Following the Arthur River, we made our way longer than I thought to the Tarkina, Takanya forest. Baden and I then tried, we need to draw something. We found some inspiration, but it wasn't what was normal. It was forced. It wasn't natural. So we pumped out a couple of these forced drawings, and we're once again we're in the space, and there was this rising tension of what are we going to create.
I'd look at these sketches, but I wasn't really that inspired to make paintings about them. I think the more time I spent down in Tassie, the more I learned about intricacies within the ecology, interaction between certain species, and problems related to introduced species and native species and how they affected each other. I shifted from, I'll paint physical pictures of the landscape, to painting thoughts and ideas about what's going on within it. I didn't see most of these animals that you can see depicted in the paintings. I didn't see how they actually interact physically. I didn't actually witness it. So they're paintings about questioning what's going on there.
Probably
Bloody sounds like a
10 nearby. Alright, that's enough. As we're hiking up the Walls of Jerusalem path, we eventually come up to a clearing, and you could see the waratah that was there. There was the first flower that we'd seen for a while that was set by a garment, and immediately we started to question: is that native? Is that from here or not? And we couldn't pick it.
It'd be very easy to just kind of cruise along and only take in the scenery, because it's beautiful, but if you don't dig deeper, you're not going to notice that there's always going to be some sort of human influence there, even if you can't physically see it.
So being in a new place reminds me of a book, Zen and the Art of Seeing by Frederick Frank, that said you've never actually seen something until you've drawn it. And by embedding yourself in a landscape for however long and recording what you see, it informs the practice that you do later, but also informs whilst you're in it.
So at Fortescue, Cam and I went for a dive, and basically as soon as we were submerged under the water, we were completely surrounded by the school of Pacific Jack mackerel. You couldn't see through them. We were surrounded by them for about half an hour or so, and then later that night we camped just around the corner at Port Arthur. We were setting up camp, and we looked. You could see down this hill into this little secluded bay, and you could see all these salmon pens, and it was just ridiculous, the contrast between where we'd been earlier that day, beautiful sunny conditions. There was still plenty of fish species around, and then we're same day, maybe a kilometre away, and there's this ugly industrial looking fishing industry. But it was just amazing to see that, okay, Tassie on one side is this still doing pretty well in terms of looking after its environment, but then to be reminded, slapped in the face 2 hours later, that, okay, there's still issues here.
So these paintings are about, or they're intended to be about, communicating that appreciation for the moment. They're based around my memories, they're based around the memories of a place, but they're also painted to be like a memory, and that's my approach to this series. And it's intentionally aiming to promote the thought within, or create any sort of change within the viewer to take on that mood, or to take on that idea of something that may only exist for a certain amount of time. The ephemeral nature of nature. It's all passing and it's all only momentary. So hopefully an understanding that the importance of what we do and the effects that we have are taken away in some way or another. It may only be a small contribution, but it's my contribution. So Styx, the Valley of the Giants, the Styx State Forest, was a destination that we knew had a history. But as you drive in, probably the most sobering of all the places we'd visited, there were clearly demolished areas of land, huge, wide girth tree trunks. Nothing else there. It was cleared. And then you drive past a sign that says protected area, and you're into probably the most clearest creek, golden ochres and beautiful siennas and rolling rocks, where you end up into a space that you know you're going to see some of the oldest, tallest trees in the southern hemisphere. But then you walk in and there's a very narrow path, and all you got to follow was these pink ribbons. And then you stood in front of a 400-year-old tree that had this completely different energy. And at the base of Gendell's staff, there's a photograph of some activists climbing that tree and preventing that from being cut down. And it seems to make so much sense, and it seems so long ago. And yet we come home, and in same area, enough to be an issue, same things still happen. And we haven't learned. So each of my paintings start with a really quick sketch, either on paper, iPad, plein air, or something. Then they work into a quick wash all over the canvas, working from photographs and sketches. Once that's dried, I can then start blocking in colour with pure turpentine, just to get the rest of the composition right. And then I finish with a mixture of terps and linseed oil to sort of give the paint a luminosity that the turpentine by itself doesn't have. The linseed oil slows it down a bit as well, so the drying time, so the final layer makes sense to work that way. One of the challenges of painting a new landscape is colour. You can't use the colours you've grown to learn about another place, and you have to come up with a whole bunch of new ones. One thing I found of Tassie is every one of these paintings has a great load of ultramarine in it. So the greens, the skies, the rocks, surfaces, everything has ultramarine in it. So when we head off, I felt like I knew exactly what was going to be painted. When we were there, I felt like I had no idea what I was going to paint. When I came home, I felt like there was pressure to start, and it was only through going photographs, going through drawings, going through ideas, and then researching the places we'd visited that the process of creating all these works was a continuous change. It evolved and grew And I think that the intentions have evolved to now about the questioning, the appreciation of the moment, the lack of understanding, and that that's okay. And I think that's where they all got to at this point. Is working closely with Baden and watching him work, seeing how he does things firsthand, showed me a way. Probably, what I appreciate about his work is more how intuitive it is. I probably have a tendency to think too much, and by watching somebody work intuitively, fast, and working in pasta, has started to enter into my work of creating looser marks, more gestural, and I think it's working.
The start of my artistic process was when I got home, I think, rather than when I was there. And I did more and more research into things that struck up some little bit of a fire in me and got me intrigued. So I continued to research Tassie devils and the history of Tasmanian tigers, other species like the lyrebird, which we thought were meant to be down there, but they were having all sorts of detrimental effects to the natural environment. So yeah, I just continued researching and then drawing more and more back in the studio. So I suppose one thing for me, the initial idea for an artwork and the finished product, there's not a long process in between. Everything happens pretty quickly. So I might do one or two sketches before I start an actual painting, and then a painting will take me generally a few days. A lot of these works are quite slow, just because of the process of having to let a certain layer dry and then come back to it and work over the top of that. But yeah, it starts with an initial drawing usually, and then working in on the canvas, mapping out the main shapes of the painting. And then it's just like a big colouring in book really. You do the basic sort of fill in, blocking in of colours, and then working layer upon layer, often wet paint on top of wet paint. And then the hard part's deciding when to stop, I think. One thing I think a lot of people will notice when they look around at this exhibition is that my paintings have a tendency to push you away and kind of encourage the viewer to stand back, whereas Liam's, with all their intricacy, really kind of draw you in to examine all the finer details in his work.